Okay, my love, it's going to be Hansel and Gretel as you wanted. Let me find the where it is.
I saw it!
Oh, that's good.
Oh!
You saw it again? Was that it?
Oh, yeah!
Okay, there's the story called Hansel and Gretel. It's a lot of pages, isn't it?
Why?
At the edge of the forest lived a poor woodcutter. And he lived with his wife, who was a spiteful woman. And they lived with their 2 children, Hansel and Gretel. I guess she was their stepmother, not their real mother. They were so poor that there was often very little food on the table. One day, there was no food at all. Everyone went to bed hungry. That night, Hansel heard his stepmother tell his father, "Husband, there are too many mouths to feed. You must leave the children in the forest tomorrow." "Wife, I cannot abandon our children. There are wolves in the forest," said the poor woodcutter. But his wife made him agree to her evil plan. Hansel felt his heart grow icy cold. But he was a clever boy, so he slipped out of the house and filled his pockets with shiny white stones.
Potatoes!
The next morning, they all rose early, and the children followed their father deep into the forest. He lit them a fire and told them he was going to gather wood and would soon be back to collect them. Do you think he'll come back? He left them, tears falling down his face. The day passed slowly. Hansel kept their fire going, but when night fell, it grew very cold, and they could hear all kinds of rustling under the shadowy trees. Gretel could not understand why their father had not come back to collect them. So Hansel had to tell her that their mother had told the woodcutter to leave them there deliberately.
Hey, this is your aspirin, but it's not melted
Thank
yet.
you. Okay, thank you very much. And could I have a hot Horlicks, please?
Hello.
You're requesting too much now. Hot Horlicks,
Thank you. Now read the story, shall I?
not honey and lemon.
Oh, and the honey and lemon, please.
No, only choose one.
Okay, honey and lemon.
Mommy.
Let's carry on with the story, shall we?
Mommy, can I have some apple juice?
No, before bite, no apple juice. You can have a glass of warm milk.
Your milk. Maybe you could have Horlicks, maybe if you want.
Horlicks?
Yes.
Okay. Let's read on the story. So Hansel has told his sister what their mother had said to the woodcutter. And now he and his sister both know that they've been left alone. "Don't worry, Gretel," he said. "I will lead us back home." And in the moonlight, he showed her the line of shiny white pebbles that he had dropped.
Daddy, why do you live in the forest?
Well, that's because in the old days, people didn't live in towns quite as much as they live today. So people would live in huts in the forest, especially if you're a woodcutter, because his job was cutting wood with the axe. So they followed the shiny white stones that he had dropped, one by one, and they were soon home, where their father greeted them with great joy. But their mother was not pleased. Some time passed. They managed to survive with very little to eat. But another day came when Hansel heard his mother demanding that the woodcutter leave them in the forest again.
sad they're gonna leave it there again.
Yeah, it's very sad. But when Hansel went to collect more pebbles, he found the front door locked and he couldn't get out. In the morning, the father gave them each a piece of bread and he led them even deeper into the forest than before. All day long, Hansel comforted Gretel and told him that this time he had left a trail of breadcrumbs to lead them to safety back home. But when the moon rose and the children set off, there was not a breadcrumb to see. Do you know why?
No,
Go on, have a guess.
because the birds are eaten.
That's better. Good. The birds had eaten every last breadcrumb. There was nothing to do but go to sleep and wait until the morning. The next day, they walked and walked, but they saw nothing but trees. And the next day after that was just the same. By this time, they were not only cold and hungry, but deeply frightened. It looked as though they would never be able to find a way out of the forest. But just as it was getting dark, they came to a clearing, and there stood a strange little house. The walls were made of gingerbread, the windows of fine spun sugar, and the tiles on the roof were brightly striped sweets. Hansel and Gretel could not believe their luck, and they were soon breaking off bits of the house to eat. Then a little squeaky voice came from inside. "Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is that eating my sweet house?" And who do you think said that?
And the witch.
It will be the witch, yes. Out of the front door came a very old woman. She smiled sweetly at the children and said, "Dear ones, you don't need to eat my house. Come inside and I will give you lots to eat and you shall sleep in warm beds." Hansel and Gretel needed no second asking. They were soon tucked up, warm and full of hot milk, ginger biscuits and apples. They both fell asleep quickly. Little did they know that they were in worse danger than ever before. The old woman was a wicked witch, and she had decided to make Gretel work in the kitchen, and worst of all, she planned to fatten up Hansel so that she might eat him. Wow, I wouldn't like to come to that witch's house. I don't want to be eaten. The next morning, she knocked poor Hansel in a cage. There he is in the cage. And she gave Gretel a broom and told her to clean the house from top to toe. In the evening, the witch fed Hansel a huge plate of chicken, but she only gave Gretel a dry hunk of bread. But once she was asleep, Hansel shared his meal with Gretel. So they lived for many days. The witch could not see very well, so every morning she made Hansel put his finger through the cage so she could tell how fat he was getting. But clever Hansel poked a chicken bone through the bars so the witch would thought that he was still too skinny to eat. After many days, she grew fed up and decided to eat him anyway. She asked Gretel to help prepare the big oven. The witch made some bread to go with her supper, and when the oven was hot, she put it to cook. When the bread was ready, the witch asked Gretel to lift it out to cool. But Gretel was clever too. She pretended she couldn't reach the tray, and when the witch bent down to get the tray, which was inside the oven, Gretel gave her a great shove and closed the door. And now the witch is shut inside the oven, cooking. And that was the end of the witch. Gretel released Hansel, and together they set off once more to try and find their way home. After all their adventures, fortune finally smiled on them, and they soon found the path home. Their father was simply overjoyed to see them again. And what, you might ask, of their mean mother? Well, the poor woodcutter had not had a happy moment since he left the children in the forest. He had become so miserable that she decided there was no living with him. The day before Hansel and Gretel had returned, she had upped her sticks and left. That served her right, didn't it?
Why?
Well, because it served her right.
What did it serve her right?
Oh, it means she deserved not to have a house. She deserved to go. So she went just before Hansel and Gretel got back. Now, the bit they didn't say in this is the wicked witch had a lot of treasure. And Hansel and Gretel took it back to their father so they would have enough to eat in the future. Maybe they didn't mention that Hansel and Gretel took it, because that would be sort of stealing, even though the witch was now dead.
No, it was hot.